Okay, hi everybody. I think we'll get started. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to talk about something a little bit different than probably you've been experiencing throughout the sessions so far. It's not about AI, it's about real people. So it's about designing for accessibility. A little bit about myself first. My name is Becky Kiichle-Gross. I am a developer turned product manager, so I started out being a real-time developer for about 10 years. I've been in product now for about 15 years. And now I'm leading a product at Mitek for authentication, biometrics capture, and detecting fraud. I have a real passion about this, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. I can tell a lot of stories. I'm going to keep to my time, I promise. But I have a lot of people in my family, in my world, as probably a lot of you guys do, who are experiencing digital interactions and real frustrated with it. And so we at Mitek have really taken a stance on designing forward for accessibility. And I'm going to help you guys learn how to do that today if you're not doing it. If you are, great. But I'm going to give you some tools that can help you that is a little bit different than probably some of the other tools that you've found out so far. So accessibility is a journey first, what we're going to talk about. Why do you want to go on this journey? You have to really decide that for yourselves and for your company. Who's going with you? Where are you going and how do you know you're there? It's hard to know if you're there because you're always going to be iterating, you're always going to be developing more, there's always going to be more things. So I'll kind of tell you how we've decided that we've made a good step, but we haven't still decided that we're there yet. Let me start my timer so that I'm not, I know what time it is. Okay. Why are we doing it? Because of this. So we did some user testing, and one of the comments from a blind user was terrible as a product manager to read. And it was actually kind of terrible. So this is their experience going through capturing a check and trying to deposit it. It's actually kind of terrible. As a blind person, I found it was really frustrating to do it. That really opened our eyes, opened our minds to the fact that we were checking the boxes for accessibility. We were meeting the standards, but we weren't truly accessible. Our users who used accessibility tools couldn't actually use them as we thought they probably could. So we went on this journey. We started, and not only does it make your products better, it makes your customers choose you. I don't know if you guys have noticed yet, but really people in the industry are almost one of the first things they're asking me now is, what is your stance on accessibility? And if you have user-facing products, so you're developing an app, for example, you need to have this as part of your arsenal, right? What you'll see in things like WCAG, WCAG, ADA compliance type of documentation is there's over 1 billion people with disabilities. That doesn't count someone like maybe your parents who use a large font. You know, so there are, if you look around the room, if you look around the airports, you'll start to notice people who use really big fonts counts for accessibility pieces. People who use dark mode, for example. A lot of developers don't think of that. They use dark mode every single day, but we design it for a regular light mode. So really what you need to do is have this shift in mindset. It's not a checkbox anymore. It's trying to design for everybody. And there's no typical user. That's the challenging part. So how do you design something if there's no typical user? Dropout rates are growing. So some of the things that you've probably noticed in some of the sessions is there's a lot of options. If there's a bank out there and you're trying to onboard, someone like me goes on there, tries to onboard, and it's hard, I don't care, I'll go to the next bank, right? So they want to have something that's really easy for them and they can get through. They have a choice, so help them choose you. And I'm going to show you guys how you can do that. Plus there's standards, so we know about these things. You'll get customers asking, Do you comply with the European Accessibility Act? Are you WCAG 2.2 compliant? These kinds of things. You want to be able to say yes. If you're WCAG 2.2, you'll meet all the rest on this screen. So that's kind of the strictest here. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. So what I'm going to start with is this. And this is called the Andy factor because Andy is one of our personas. And before I play the video, I'm going to encourage you to meet your users and watch your users. Are there any product people in the room? Oh, lots, good. So we all go watch our users and meet our users. A lot of times we don't show those interactions to our developers. And so if you are able to take videos like this and show your developers, it will help them understand it too. So that's what we've been doing a lot of. We've done a ton of usability studies, and every time we get consent to have the people videoed or recorded, and then we show our developers the interesting ones. And if you just give people who have some maybe neurodiversities, some lower vision, colorblindness type of differences, your app and see what happens, you will probably be surprised. So Andy is actually my husband. He's a really good sport about letting me test with him. I have to be careful because he gets real frustrated, as you can tell on his face. He hates being a tester because he hates digital interactions. But he's a good subject because he has really severe dyslexia and he has ADHD. So you've got to get through something fast and you've got to be able to read it. What you'll notice, and I'm going to kind of play this and narrate over it because you won't be able to hear it, but what I'm showing him and what I'm trying to have him do is take a picture of his driver's license. And this is after we had redesigned, after we had checked all the boxes, and we're now taking it to him and say, okay, you should be able to do this. And he did that. And we're like, what are you doing? Because it's like, take a picture of it. And I never would have thought a person would do that. And then if you also see the hints, which was a bug that we knew about, are sideways. And so he was like, well, but we kept saying, well, read the hint, we'll read the hint. In his brain, he was like, how can I read the hint? Because it's sideways. So his dyslexic brain could not read that hint, it just couldn't read it. Once you see it, he kind of shakes it a little bit and the bug fixes itself and it's now reading it to himself. He's able to get it pretty quick. But these things, I never would have thought because my brain sees sideways text and reads sideways text. His brain doesn't. So that's why it's so important to watch your users and see what happens. The first time I ever had him try this was maybe a year ago, and it ended with him throwing the phone at me across the table. So at least he actually gets the check mark, and I felt like, okay, we've succeeded a little bit. It would have been better on the first try, but now we learned that. So from these, him and others, we have created user personas. And that's who we use now in order to make sure that we are not only checking the boxes, but we're making things usable for our people. And we didn't want to overdo all the personas, so we have 4. And in the back of this deck, I have much more details on each of these guys. If you want to take the deck and you can use them yourselves, I encourage you to maybe start with that, but then build your own if you don't have these already. A lot of us probably have user personas. It's something that we learn about in product management, we give to our developers, but we haven't tended to do accessibility personas yet. Okay, so Andy, the first one, you guys know about him already. He has ADHD and dyslexia. He's Gen X, hates using technology. We call him the reluctant technology user. He would prefer to talk to somebody. He doesn't want to have to read something. Even some of the images don't make sense to him. And we also gave each of these guys a personality type. So you can see kind of the personality types in the slides too in the appendix. But he has the fun way. So, I mean, this is a guy who, if it doesn't work right away, he doesn't want to do it. He's not only going to go to another bank, he's just not going to have a bank account. So he's moving on. The next one's really different. So the patient and experience user, we have a lot of these people in our organization. And if you guys kind of ask around in your orgs, you probably have some people who could test. Even parents, you could find parents who are more in this one. And this is Bisma, and she is, so we kind of purposely did ABCD, or ABCD personas. Bisma's a boomer. She has a low technology proficiency also, but she has a few other accessibility needs. She has English as a second language, so she needs simple communications. She uses reading glasses, so if you're expecting her to read something on the screen and take her glasses off, those two things don't go together. So we, for example, Mitek, we take selfies. We give you instructions on the screen. We used to say, remove your glasses, and then people couldn't take a selfie, or they could, but they couldn't follow the directions. She's red, green colorblind, and she wears religious headgear, which was important for us to include because we are a global company, and we also used to say no scarves and hats. So we have transitioned our technology to be able to accept what Bisma and even Claire is reading or wearing. Bisma prefers to read. She'll come back, she wants to know where her information is going. She wants to understand what's happening. She wants to know all the steps. You know, an Andy or a Devon, they don't care about the steps, they just want to get through it. Bisma wants to know what's going on. Claire. So Claire is who we really focused on at Mitek because we had some major problems. And she is a 35-year-old millennial who has been blind her whole life. She's been grown up with technology, and she knows how to use the accessibility tools. So she uses screen readers. She uses exploration is something that you really need to be careful of on your screens, that each thing can be explored, and it has what we used to call like alt text on websites, but everything on the screen needs to have some sort of accessibility description. And her personality type is the right way, meaning she expects things to be done the right way. So she's coming in, she has high expectations of her technology to work. Devon is the kind of logical power user, we call him. And his accessibility needs aren't as high, but he has eye fatigue, so he uses dark mode. This was kind of where we got our getting things through really quickly, having visuals, because he prefers visuals, and then making sure everything works with dark mode. Okay, so these are our 4 accessibility users. We talk about these guys in our dev team like they're real people. And we're like, yeah, but could this work for Claire? Well, but is Andy going to be able to get through this? And what we did first after this is come up with our similarities. So they're also different, but if you really look at their needs, they're actually quite similar. So some of these things you'll kind of see me talk about. We as product and developers are challenged by having UX in marketing. Does anyone have UX in marketing? Ooh, good. Okay, so we have UX in marketing. So what would happen is we would get, and you'll see in a minute, we would get all these outside the box type of looking screens, like do these beautiful screens, right? But we needed to make it work for accessibility users. So we had to modify them a little bit, and you'll see what we did. But these are the main categories. So first of all, simplify works for all of our personas. Make sure it's really clear. Make sure the text is simple. It works for English as a second language person. Offer different types of help options. Work for them. So if you can do something for them, do it. If you can make your algorithms work with glasses on, do that instead of making them take off their glasses. So that's the kind of thing that we really worked on in our dev teams. Make sure it works with a hat on. All of us test with all of our glasses and hats on now because of that. I never take off my glasses anymore, and I used to. Careful with color. So color is really important because we use that as an indicator all over the place. We need, if you're thinking of accessibility, you need to use color as an indicator, but not only color as an indicator. So if you're using a green, for example, to indicate success, you also need a check mark, or you also need a word that says success. Just a color isn't going to get you there with colorblind users, for example. And then make sure that the contrast is high. So as our vision starts to deteriorate in older age, we really need the higher contrast. And that's another thing to be careful of when you are working with like UX designs. Sometimes they'll give you like gradient buttons. Make sure the gradient button meets the contrast on both the darker part of the gradient and the lighter part of the gradient. Reducing steps, make it really simple, and then stay inside the box. So familiar UX patterns. This is what Claire is expecting. Familiar UX patterns. Okay, so how do we get there? We can start with the checklists. There's checklists all over the web. You can find these. How do I become WCAG 2.2 compliant? You can go to their site. You can go to all sorts of different sites. There's companies that will help you. There's companies that will audit you and give you checklists, give you reports back. So start with that. But then start walking in your persona's footsteps. So turn on your app with TalkBack and see how terrible it is or how good it is. That was really eye-opening for me when I did that for the first time. And you start to hear things. If it's not, the focus isn't right, it might read things in different order. You might not even, we got to a screen once that had directions for how to capture your ID, and it said nothing. So if you were a blind user, there's a screen and it said nothing. So we had to really revamp some of those and make sure it had all of the accessibility strings. And then use the tools. I'll show you some of the tools that we use. And then finish with user testing. So come back. And if you find people in your company, if you find a parent, a brother, a friend who's willing to help you, come back to them after you do redesigns. Or even show them some printouts. Like we used to kind of do that a long time ago. Okay, so let me show you how we did it. Actually, we'll go through the checklist first. I'm not going to go real deep into this, but this is an example of one of the checklists that you'll find to become WCAG 2.2 compliant. When we did our whole redesign, 2.2 compliant is a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. 7 to 1 is WCAG AAA, which is the next level. So we just chose, since we're redesigning, to go to 7 to 1, and you'll see that. Make sure all the instructions are clear, understandable, and that the primary and secondary actions are clear. So sometimes if you're in an app, there's two buttons that look exactly the same. The users who maybe don't know how to have, what they're supposed to push, or they don't know what the buttons mean with the text on there, make it really obvious which one they're supposed to press. So an arrow, or you'll kind of see how we designed it. Filled in button versus a not filled in button, for example. Make sure your touch targets are high enough to be able to be tapped on. Font sizing must be able to be enlarged. So this is an interesting one for if you have an Apple phone or even Android, go into large text mode, accessibility large text mode, and see how your buttons look, see how your instructions look. Make sure that you can read everything, because if you can't read everything now, then you're not accessible. The other thing is really important is to make sure that you can use it in landscape and portrait. And the reason for that is some users will have an iPad that's mounted, let's say, on a wheelchair, and it is always landscape. And if you design all your screens only for portrait, then you're going to become inaccessible in that way. And make sure the focus is given to the right order. This is kind of like the same thing as when you're designing screens for web and you're tabbing through. It's the same type of thing for native apps. Make sure the focus is in the proper order so it's read correctly. And then here's just some examples. You can find these all over the web, but what we do is we do a color contrast checker. And then we also do this color blindness simulator, which is really interesting if you've done a lot of color work on your apps to see what it looks like. A lot of us who aren't colorblind don't really understand what the differences would be. So if you have something like we had, where we had a green circle that turned to a red circle, and I had this in front of a colorblind user, and I said, "Can you tell when your face is in the oval?" And he said, "No, how am I supposed to tell that?" Like, "Oh, well, it turns to green." And there was no difference for him on the red to green. You can choose certain reds and certain greens to do better, but that's where something like this kind of a checker would be helpful for you. And then walk in their shoes. So are there any flows where Andy might get stuck? Is Devon going to be able to use it in dark mode? Turn on the screen reader and see what happens. Can your parents use it? Turn on large fonts, all the things we've been talking about. Okay, there's also a lot of companies able to help, so you can look that up if you want to work with a company that does this. But it's a good idea to just start with what you have. Start with yourself. See if you can get through it with all of these tools turned on. And then kind of find your network around you and try it out. Okay, so I'm going to take you through an example of these things working through when we did our redesign. So here's what we got from our UX team. There's a few things you probably already notice. It looks really nice, right? There's a nice gradient button. It seems pretty clear. It says, I'm ready, continue. And it looks really modern. But if you walk through the shoes of an accessibility user, there's a few things that we've noticed. We need to have the exit out button. That's something that Clara is going to really expect to have. Also, if you think about a user like Claire, our blind user, she's not going to know if she has good light, right? She's not going to know if there's glare. In fact, even when I did that testing on our real life Andy, he had no idea. Like, it just wasn't registering for him. How do you know to avoid glare? And that would stop him immediately. Also, just saying still or saying stand still, it's unnecessary instructions. People know if they're putting their document on the table, it's already still. They know to hold it still. They know to hold still for that. So getting rid of unnecessary instructions. One of the things we noticed, especially with our ADHD users, is they will only read the first instruction if there's something to read. So they'll read the first one and then just press next. So one of our iterations through here had a list of things to do, and we tested it with them, and they never read the whole list. So make sure your most important instruction is at the top. So if you want someone to read something, then that's what they're going to see. Also, we ended up with some buttons that did multiple things. So our I am ready, continue button, if you look at the subtext, says that by pressing this, you consent to something. Normally, you would want, if you have a Claire user or a Bisma user, she wants to read the consent probably. She wants to see what you're consenting to and where is my image going. So those need to be separated out. Let's see. And then actually, this, if I come up and point to it, this contrast was not good enough. It didn't meet the 4.5 to 1. This one did, but this one didn't. So when you have a button like that, you have to be careful of the colors on both sides. Okay, so we used the tools. We did some redesign. We actually went to an external design company and came up with that one on the far left. And we lovingly refer to him as our blockhead. We didn't really love him. So we changed that a little bit. But we got some good images. We tested the images. And then these are all using the tools. So I just took some screenshots of some of the color checkers. So this is I don't remember which one is which, but some are with fully colorblind people, with red-green colorblind. And then checking if it's light mode or dark mode. So this is what we ended up with. This is where we landed. So we have the most important thing is centering the face in the oval. The second most, if you're going to read everything, is to avoid things covering your face. Probably the most difficult thing for us when redesigning for accessibility was making sure your text was enlargeable to 200%. So that's why you see the list the way that it is. So if you're using large text mode on these screens, you'll be able to read everything all the way up to the highest text size that you have in Apple and Android. If we put them back to back, or right after each other, they would stomp on each other. And making it dynamic like this, a little bit dynamically able to change, was a better choice for us. Also, something I didn't mention, but it's in one of our older screens. I didn't show the very old screen where we actually started. We used to have little arrows with a red mark. So some of you guys might use Mitek. If you use Mitek as some of the older SDKs, we have a little red arrow with instruction. This last year, I went through a lot of accessibility sessions and conferences, and red is kind of one of those colors that is some generations, some people, they think to themselves, I don't want to press the red button. So when you are using red, be careful with it, because they aren't going to be attracted to looking and doing these things that are by the red button, right? So we changed everything to blue. And you'll also notice that we have a different instruction image depending on if you're on dark mode or light mode. So if you used our image from the light mode on dark mode, it didn't give you enough contrast, but using our light mode, and same with the other way. So we have a different color scheme for both, and we allow our integrators to have a different color scheme for both. So think about your integrators as well if you're doing SDKs. All right, so how do you know you're there? Let's see what some of our outcomes are. First off, you have to identify what's important to you. How are you going to measure it? You have to be able to measure it in order to be able to see if you've improved. For us, it's things like, because we have a capture library, it's things like percentage of in-focus images, if it can automatically capture versus having to go to a manual capture, making sure that you can get through the interaction in a short amount of time. And then making sure that you're not always entering these help screens. So we also added with some of these things, we had to add some counters and measurements in there. So that's kind of this, make sure you can measure everything. So for us, after we released, we did probably about 6 months of redesign for accessibility, back and forth with different testers, and we built the personas and we released it. And we went from auto capture of about 92% to about 94%. So up 2%, which on millions of transactions was very impactful for us. Auto capture is important to us because we know it passes all of the image quality measurements. Error types, speaking of image quality, we wanted the image quality errors to go down, and that's kind of a hand in hand with the auto capture. So we did see it going down from 3% to 2%. And then our time to capture, this was the really big one, went from 30 seconds down to 20 seconds. So that we saw as a big win. This all led to our ultimate outcome of having our approval rates for our customers go up to 93%. So our customers who are integrators, banks, they're using our SDK, and they are now seeing a higher approval rate when they are using our new SDK. Some of that can be attributed to the changes that we put in, maybe not all. Okay, so wrapping up, accessibility is a journey. You define where you want to get, take these small steps, start to experience these things for yourself. Who's going to help you get there? So I encourage you to use some user accessibility personas. Talk about them like real people. See if these people can actually use your product. Use the tools and then continually improve. So we have now a commitment to every one of our releases having some new accessibility updates included. And that's everything. Oh, no, that isn't. I'll end on this one quote, and it is, after we redesigned the selfie, I gave it to Andy to try, and this is what he said, and this is, to me, is a huge win, because he actually got through and it's like, oh, well, that wasn't really that hard. So when it started as something that he threw the phone at me in a pizza parlor and ended on this, that we considered a win. So find someone to be able to test it and see if you're really, really getting better. So that's everything. If you have questions, we've been through a long accessibility journey, so I'd love to chat with you. Also, feel free to text me or find me on the app. Thank you. I think we do have time for questions if there are any questions now. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed about chapter ID or device games is a lot of asking people to change orientation. Do you still do that? And have you thought about the impact of that?
Yes. So for checks, we still do it. And the reason is because you need a really high resolution amount of good pixels in order to get everything you need out of the checks. For IDs, however, we do now allow you to go both ways. So we just kind of crop out the excess. If it's a phone, an older Android, that only has a 720p resolution, we actually don't let you meet. We do allow it, but we encourage our integrators not to do that. If it has 1080p, which most phones do, then it's fine if you use a portrait mode, and then you just kind of get that ID in the middle. The checks we're still working on that, but if you can imagine the landscape, like if you're a portrait and you have this long skinny, by the time you get the good pixels, it's just not enough. Yes?
So you mentioned letting integrators configure different things, like maybe they want to be their brand colors or something
Yes.
like that. How do you balance making sure that it stays accessible while also letting them do those customizations?
It's a hard balance, right? So we have an accessibility guide that you can look at, and where it says things like make sure you're checking these. We're also kind of being a consultant on a lot of them on just what you can and should and shouldn't check. But because of that, we say that our default screens are accessible. And knowing that, yeah, if someone changes it to red and orange, we can't do anything about that, right? So then maybe it becomes unaccessible, but our default colors that we use is accessible. So we kind of we're trying to model it for them, but yeah, our integrators can change it. We expect them to change it to their brand colors. I mean, we want them to do that, but also do it consciously where you're making the right choices. So we're trying to help them do that. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Red versus green color blindness, because I saw that in the final version you have the green, you still have the green oval, right?
In our final version, we have a green oval that shows on the instruction screen. On the interactive screen, it's actually white and it turns to blue. So on the instruction screen, it shows a green one. The tricky part is when you have red turning to green or green turning to red. So, right, because you can't see the difference. If you have green on a picture, then yeah, you can see it. But it's important to put it through that color checker to make sure that it's contrasting enough for color blindness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I didn't show the interactive screens, but the interactive screens have the hints that come up. So we did changes like making sure that there's full contrast on all of those, making sure the oval is white to blue. Same with when you're doing a check or an ID, it's white to blue instead of green to red, or red to green, rather. Good. Any other questions? Okay, that's it. Enjoy your conference. Thank you.